In this video, we will be looking at the theme of heroism in Frankenstein and Never Let Me Go. This is for the Edexcel English Literature Paper 2 Prose Study, Science and Society. First of all, with any thematic question, you have to think about the concept and try and define it. I would recommend that you first listen to the Beyond Belief episode on superheroes, made by Radio 4, because it explores this concept and relates it to ethical and religious concerns, and it's really interesting. It only lasts about 25 minutes. Having listened to it myself, these are the ideas that I've gleaned from it. In order to define heroism, we've got 7 main categories here. So, what is an heroic act? Well, it could be defined as one which goes beyond that which a common man can perform. So an example of excellence. This also leads into the second point. Excellent in what sense? Usually involving a moral good or a noble end. These heroic acts also usually involve courage and a quest or a challenge that has to be overcome. They can also involve self-sacrifice and the battling of a nemesis. And then ultimately, these acts need to be recognised by others in order to be deemed heroic. So we've got 7 interesting ideas there that all came from exploding this key term, heroism. So in terms of your AO1, that's always the first stage, define your concept. And then the second stage we're going to look at next is linking it to the 2 texts. So I'm going to do this in the form of a simple table. I'm going to put my ideas in the centre, and then I'm going to put my 2 texts either side. So I would like you to pause this video now and complete this stage for yourself. What aspects of Frankenstein, go for the big and most obvious aspects, could match with each of these ideas, and maybe be thinking to what extent are they really matching. Don't twist the text. If you think it doesn't really match, then say that in your notes. And then do the same for Never Let Me Go, and then come back to this video and I will show you my answers, and they might be slightly different from yours, and that is fine. Okay, so hopefully you filled in your own chart, and let's have a look at how I would go approaching these points. So, in Frankenstein, what heroic acts does a character perform that goes beyond that which the common man could do? Well, I'm going to start off with Victor. He has a developed intellect and an obsessive dedication in the creation of the creature. So you could deem the creation of the creature an heroic act. The creature himself, also arguably heroic. He's certainly capable of superhuman feats, both intellectually and physically. He self-educates and he can scale mountains in a couple of bounds. This is a potential form of heroism, but it's clearly one which is never fulfilled, as he arguably doesn't really get the opportunity to conduct any acts that could be called heroic, because that's thwarted quite early in the novel due to society's influence. So then we need to ask, if we're thinking about Victor mostly then, are his acts morally good? Is he attempting to serve a noble end? Well, the creation of the creature arguably serves a moral end. You'd need to look carefully at Victor's justification in detail in chapter 4. Some of his motivation, he confesses, is selfish. He wishes to be treated and seen as a god, a father of a new race, largely for his own ends rather than for any sense of serving a greater good. However, then when he thinks about the creation of the female and how he might be able to justify that to himself, he does consider some utilitarian arguments. So this is very much debatable and depends on which bits of the text you focus on. Do Victor's actions involve courage? Well, not so much in the creation. That involves, I would say, more dedication rather than moral courage, because Victor does not really stop to question the ethical implications of what he's doing. However, he does demonstrate courage later on in the quest to destroy what he has created, and this kind of links to the second idea. Heroism might involve a quest or a challenge that needs to be overcome. Well, he certainly does this. He has to destroy the creature, and this is a traditional literary quest. He has to endure hardship, and if you've just written the mock essay on journeys, then you'll know that the length of the journey is epic. It's on the grand epic scale, and that certainly contributes to a sense of heroism. Does Victor's heroism involve self-sacrifice? Well, ultimately, yes. At the end of the novel, this quest does end up with Victor sacrificing his own life, although you could argue this is more a consequence of his failure to act sooner. He has actually allowed a lot of other people, members of his family and his best friend, to be sacrificed on his behalf already. Does Victor have to battle a nemesis? Well, certainly yes. This is one of the strongest categories for Victor, Victor versus creature. And this is arguably Victor versus Victor if you have considered the doppelganger interpretation. And then our final question. In order to be deemed truly heroic, these deeds need to be recognised by others. So the final scene with Walton then is crucial. Obviously it's a frame, not just a final scene, because it opened and closed the novel, so that structural point is going to be important. That final scene with Walton is crucial to fulfilling this category. Victor wants his account to be recorded, because only then can he attain the status of hero. However, it's his version of events that is recorded, and that remains highly debatable. Walton talks about how things are being edited, and we've very much got a sense of an unreliable narrator in the form of Victor. So that means that any form of heroism, in spite of Victor's demand to be acknowledged as hero, remains quite debatable. So if we move over to Never Let Me Go, are the clones' actions heroic? Do they go beyond that which a common person could be expected to perform? Well, they die for humanity. They end their lives early for this purpose, and that is certainly arguably heroic. Are they serving a moral good or a noble end? Well, according to the utilitarian perspective, they are serving a greater good through their deaths, because they are saving, one is saving more than one. So that would be meeting utilitarian criteria for the greatest good for the greatest number. Although this is definitely ethically questionable because they have no choice. They are simply born into a role which they then have to fulfill. So is it really morally good? Do their lives and their deaths involve courage? Well, definitely yes. It's a quiet determination, but it is certainly admirable. So the death of Ruth particularly, and perhaps as well the death of Tommy right at the end of the novel. Do the clones have to undertake some kind of quest or challenge? Well, they do undertake a quest at the end of the novel. It's a quest for a deferral, but really it's a quest for knowledge and to understand who they are. Do they have to sacrifice themselves? Well, yes, definitely. Again, this is one of the strongest matches. The donations are an example of self-sacrifice, and their deaths are sacrificial. Do they have to battle a nemesis? Well, not really, but it's kind of there, isn't it, in the novel? There is an invisible system governing the clones' lives, because this is a dystopia. But Ishiguro intentionally keeps that invisible force. So they don't really know who they're battling, therefore it's a battle that they can never really win. So it's a classic dystopian element. So the ultimate question for Never Let Me Go. Is the heroism of the clones sacrificed recognised? Well, no, it absolutely isn't. It cannot be recognised in their dystopian society, because that would undermine the entire project of clones and organ donation. However, their heroism is certainly recognised by the reader, as your essay will just have shown. Okay, so what do we do now? We've got lots of ideas, and we need to start organising those ideas thematically. So I have colour-coded one set in like an orangey colour and one set in a green colour, and then I've separated out this final one in yellow. And I think that these are all connected, these ideas. And so we've got 3 different colours here, and I'm looking to turn these into 3 different bridges. Pause the video here. How would you frame these bridges? Have a look at what all the orangey ones have in common. And can you create a bridge that starts with the word both? That means that you could cover all of these ideas in that section of your essay, then repeat for green and for yellow, and then play the video again. Okay, so you might have come up with something like this. We have got heroic characters, arguably heroic characters, conducting arguably heroic deeds, And then we've got this final question of recognition. Are they really heroic if they go unrecognised? Do they have to be recognised to be heroic? So here are my 3 bridges. Compare these to your own. Both novels involve arguably heroic characters who at various points exemplify heroic characteristics, being morally good, self-sacrificing, and courageous. Both novels include heroic deeds as the protagonist's quest to overcome challenges and battle a nemesis. And finally, both novels explore the key question, for a deed to be heroic, must it be recognised as such? And the final stage of your plan. You've now got your main ideas and you've organised them. So obviously each of these ideas needs to be supported. You need to now find the evidence that you could use to go with each of these ideas. As you're finding it, you need to be looking for evidence where there is a clear technique at work. It needs to be one of the bigger prose techniques rather than the small language techniques that you're looking for. Although you may come across some interesting use of language in your search, you're much more likely to be talking about things like characterisation, narrative voice, or use of setting. You then need to ask, how can the context of the novel help me to explain why the author has written about this? If you ask the question why in your mind and then search through your knowledge of context, you'll find that you come up with something much more relevant rather than asking yourself the question, what context could I possibly put in here? That would be the wrong way round. You need to ask the question why and then look to the context to provide you with the answer. And this final stage, the evaluation stage in terms of the links. We've got links, we've got bridges, but in order to make those links and comparisons really strong, we need to be evaluating how far. So I've put in some arrows here that would show you how the balance of your argument might shift as you're comparing these texts. Do the heroic characters serve a moral good or a noble end? Well, Never Let Me Go is much more philosophically clear in terms of what it's debating. It's definitely debating the utilitarian perspective in a much clearer way, so we simply have to evaluate whether or not we are convinced by the utilitarian agenda of the society in Never Let Me Go. Victor himself is much more complex, self-contradictory and ambiguous in terms of his intentions. Why is he doing this? He's one man, he's not a society. In terms of weighing up the level of courage that the various characters show, the clones are more consistently courageous, although it's a less obvious form of courage, arguably, than that which is demonstrated by Shelley. In terms of the level of self-sacrifice, it's again more obvious and more consistent that the clones are required to sacrifice themselves. So in terms of character, the characters in Never Let Me Go would certainly be seeming to fulfill the description of heroism, heroic characters, far more neatly and obviously than the characters in Frankenstein. However, when we move on to the second part of the essay, we can see that the arrows turn around and face the other way. Are the acts performed by the clones heroic? Well, I would call them rather passive in their heroism. Certainly Victor is a far more actively heroic character. Likewise, the quest that Victor undertakes is certainly more traditional, and the nemesis he faces is certainly much more apparent and obvious, taking a tangible physical form. And then when we get to our final and most arguably interesting section of the essay, Victor is certainly demanding a form of recognition that the clones, it does not occur to them to recognise. However, we recognise it. So perhaps that might shift our arrow back the other way in terms of questioning where does true heroism lie in either of these texts. So there was a lot of content there. How can you do all of that in an hour and 15 minutes in the exam? Well, this method that we've just been through needs to be as automatic as it can be. And things become automatic if you practice them. So if you look at your Teams channel, you'll find that you've got examples of past questions, which can be useful to practice with. And we've also given you our predictions of future questions, heroism being one of them, so that you can practice going through this thinking process. The more thinking that you've done in advance, the less original thinking you have to do in the exam. And the examples need to come to you. So when you're collecting your ideas in your spider diagram or your table, however you choose to plan, the quicker the examples can come and the quicker you can find your supporting evidence in the text, the earlier you can start writing, and therefore the more you can write. So how can you do this? Make sure that you've completed chapter summary sheets for each novel, and if you have, then recreate them from memory. That way you're testing yourself, that you really know where the important things are in each novel. And you can also do a bit of a quotation finding race. You can challenge yourself to find the moment of creation as quickly as you can, to find Victor's justification for creation, to find Victor's death, to find Ruth's death. So practice yourself finding your way around your texts, and all of this will mean that you save time in the exam.